Agatha Raisin and the file Charles took from her desk. On a damp, ghastly morning, one misplaced file becomes the spark that uncovers a far darker truth lurking behind the village's quiet charm. And when a body turns up beside a potting shed, Agatha Raisin realizes someone is willing to kill to keep their secrets buried. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Carsley woke under a sulky grey sky, the sort that hinted at rain but lacked the energy to deliver it. The village crouched in its usual morning quiet, a single milk float whining down the lane, a dog barking at nothing useful, and a faint drift of wood smoke from a cottage where someone had the sense to keep warm. Inside her own cottage, Agatha Raisin stalked from room to room with a cigarette clamped between her fingers and a scowl sharp enough to split stone. She had misplaced a file. Not just any file, but the wretched manila folder containing her notes for a modest PR job she had unwisely agreed to take on. A village charity wanted a fresher image, and Agatha, ever hungry for proof that she remained professionally relevant, had said yes. She had spent hours scribbling ideas, crossing them out, rewriting them, then feeling faintly important. Now the file was gone, vanished from the very center of her desk as if it had sprouted legs. "Where is it?" she muttered, yanking open drawers as though a small manila creature might leap out and apologize. Hodge sat on the desk, tail wrapped elegantly around his body, watching her performance with feline superiority. The cat blinked once, slowly, as if to say that he, at least, had not misplaced a thing in years. "Don't smirk," Agatha snapped. "You're practically sitting on the trail of evidence." Hodge gave the faintest rumble of disinterest. Agatha blew out a long plume of smoke. She disliked the sensation of being disorganized, especially when she knew perfectly well she was. Still, she had not moved that file. She was certain of it, reasonably certain, certain enough to blame someone else, which was always more satisfying. The culprit presented himself in her mind at once, Charles Fraith. He had come by yesterday, lounging in her doorway like a cat in human form, offering to lend his expert advice for her little project. She had let him into the study for barely 10 minutes. 10 minutes was enough for any number of crimes. Agatha stubbed out her cigarette, grabbed her coat, and marched into the lane. The air was damp and chilly, Carsley in a mood. She strode past Doris Simpson's cottage, where Doris was fussing with a potted fern. Doris brightened. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. Lovely day starting, isn't it?" "It's not," Agatha replied, stomping past. At the Red Lion, she found Charles precisely where any sensible betting man would expect, settled in a corner with a half-pint, looking so serene one wanted to tip him off his chair just to see if he reacted. The pub still smelled of yesterday's stew, and a thin stream of village regulars murmured over the crossword. Charles smiled the instant he saw her. "Aggie, love, you look like a thunderstorm hunting a target." "You've taken something from me," Agatha said, hands on hips. "Only admiration," he replied. She glared. Charles sighed lightly. "Fine, yes, I borrowed that. That little folder you were working on. I wanted a peek. You stole it. Borrowed. Without asking. Well, you were in a mood." He tilted his head. "As you are now." "Give it back," Charles winced. "About that. I seem to have misplaced it." Agatha's voice landed like an axe. "Where?" "Somewhere on the estate," he said, far too breezily for someone confessing to intellectual theft. "I was helping the gardener move some chairs, or perhaps it was the other way round. Anyway, I must have put it down." Two old men at the bar looked over as Agatha exploded. "You mean to say my professional file, my work, has been abandoned on your vast, ridiculous property?" Charles gave a helpless shrug. "Hardly abandoned, Aggie. It's perfectly safe. Somewhere." A ripple of amusement swept through the pub. The villager nearest her, a stout woman with a knitted cardigan, whispered to her neighbour, "She'll have that lordling's head on a platter before closing time." Agatha felt her humiliation deepen. The idea that she let Charles Fraith run errands for her was mortifying. The idea that she had done so incompetently was even worse. Mrs. Bloxby, who had been sipping a modest tea nearby, rose and approached with gentle calm. "Mrs. Raisin," she said warmly, "perhaps we can all take a breath. I'm sure the file will be found." "It ought never to have needed finding," Agatha said, though she softened marginally under Mrs. Bloxby's serene gaze. Sometimes when we misplace things, Mrs. Blocksby added, it's not the object that troubles us, but what it represents. Agatha bristled. Nothing is troubling me except Charles being an unhelpful idiot. Charles looked wounded. I try to bring a bit of charm to your mornings, and this is my reward. Charm, Agatha scoffed, is what people use when they're entirely useless. Now that's unfair, Charles said. I'm useful well, never you mind. Before Agatha could launch a fresh assault, the pub door flew open. Doris Simpson burst in, cheeks flushed and eyes bulging. Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Fraith. Oh, you won't believe. Oh, it's dreadful. Agatha's instinct sharpened. Doris rarely appeared with news unless it involved something broken, burnt, or dead. This was the dead sort. What is it, Doris? Agatha said, voice taut. There's a body, Doris squeaked, on Mr. Fraith's property, behind the potting shed. Several villagers gasped with enthusiasm. Agatha stared. A body? What on earth were you doing behind his potting shed? I wasn't there. Not me. My cousin went walking the grounds. She likes the scenery, and she came running down the lane calling for help. I followed and, oh, it's awful. Bill Wong entered just then, breath misting as he took in the scene. Doris has already rung us, he said. We need to go. Charles, it's on your land. Agatha, best you stay out of it. Like hell, Agatha snapped. Charles stood, rubbing his forehead. If there's a corpse behind my potting shed, I should very much like to know why. Agatha grabbed her coat tighter. And my file? Doris gulped. That's the awful part, Mrs. Raisin. The file, the one you were fussing about, it's lying right next to the body. The pub fell silent. Even Charles's eyebrows dropped. My file is at a murder scene, Agatha said, outrage and dread fighting for dominance. Exactly so, Doris said, trembling. It's right there by the poor thing's hand. Agatha felt the strange, familiar prickle she always felt when a mystery reared its head, half fear, half thrill, half annoyance at herself for being drawn in. She turned to Charles, who looked shaken but not half as shaken as he ought to be. You, she said, jabbing a finger at him, are coming with me. Charles blinked. Of course, but why? Because, Agatha growled, I'm not letting you lose anything else today. The villagers parted like a small, excited sea as Agatha marched to the door. Bill followed, already preparing questions. Mrs. Blocksby murmured a quiet prayer. Hodge, invisible but ever present in Agatha's thoughts, would no doubt have found this entire business beneath him. Agatha stepped into the chilly air, her temper warming her more than her coat. Dead bodies, missing files, and Charles's eternally vague excuses. Carsley really did know how to ruin a morning. But she felt oddly alive. A murder behind Charles Fraith's potting shed was dreadful, yes, but also irresistibly, dangerously intriguing. Come on, Charles, she said. Let's get my file back. He fell into step beside her with a sigh. You do make life terribly dramatic, Aggie. And you, she replied, lighting another cigarette, make life terribly inconvenient. The smoke curled upwards into the heavy sky, a thin grey thread tying the morning together in one knot of irritation and anticipation. Whatever waited behind that potting shed, Agatha was walking straight towards it, file, corpse, and all. The sky over Charles Fraith's estate hung low and heavy, the colour of old pewter. The drizzle had thickened since they left the Red Lion, settling into the sort of mist that seeped into clothes and made hair misbehave. Agatha Raisin strode ahead with grim purpose, coat flapping, cigarette clamped like a weapon. Charles lagged behind her, attempting dignity on the slippery path. Doris Simpson shuffled between them, breathless and trembling, as though terrified she might be blamed for the entire business. The grassy track dipped into a hollow where Charles's potting shed crouched, a squat, weather-beaten structure that looked guilty even without a corpse beside it. Police tape fluttered in the damp air. Bill Wong stood near the shed door, talking to two constables who nodded earnestly. The uniformed officers wore expressions of mild horror mixed with rural inconvenience, as if murders remained deeply impolite. Bill spotted Agatha and sighed. I told you to stay out of it. And I ignored you, Agatha said crisply. Where's my file? Priorities, Mrs. Raisin, Bill murmured. That is a priority. Charles attempted a noble cough. She is rather attached to her paperwork. Bill raised a single eyebrow, the look reserved for moments when Agatha stretched his patience thin enough to see daylight through it. but he stepped aside, letting her approach the ground where the body lay. Meredith Prowse had been young, somewhere in her late 20s. Agatha remembered seeing her once at a charity meeting, fresh-faced, earnest, with that bright, hopeful expression people tended to lose after a few years in Carsley. Now she lay half on her side, arm bent awkwardly beneath her. Mud streaked her trousers. Her handbag rested several inches away, as though dropped during a struggle or placed deliberately. What riveted Agatha, however, was the manila file lodged beneath the crook of Meredith's elbow. "There," she announced, evidence of Charles's incompetence. "Oh, do shut up," Charles murmured, though without heat. Bill crouched and lifted the file using 2 fingertips, as if it smelled faintly suspicious. "Yours, I assume." Agatha snatched it. "Stolen from my desk. And look where it turns up." Charles cleared his throat. "Borrowed, Aggie. Borrowed. Intent matters." "Intent rarely improves stupidity," she retorted. Bill straightened. "Mrs. Raisin, did you arrange a meeting with Meredith here?" Agatha reeled back. "Of course not. I barely knew the girl, and I'd hardly choose a potting shed for professional consultations." "She might have come looking for the file," Charles offered helpfully, "if she knew I had it." "You told her?" Agatha snapped. "Not intentionally." Charles gestured vaguely. "I might have mentioned it at some point during the dinner I hosted." "Dinner?" Agatha repeated. "Since when do you host dinners for charity volunteers?" "When I feel civic-minded," he said grandly. "Or bored," Agatha muttered. Bill examined the ground near the body. She didn't die here. Too little disturbance in the soil. Someone moved her. Agatha felt a familiar tingle, curiosity mixed with unease. She scanned the area with sharper eyes. There were faint grooves in the mud leading from the hedgerow, and the angle of the handbag wasn't right. It lay too neatly for a tumble. "She was dragged," Agatha said. "And placed." Bill nodded slowly. "Possibly. And there's bruising on the wrist." "So, not natural," Agatha murmured. "Not remotely," Bill replied. A murmur reached them from behind the tape. Villagers had begun to gather, half of Carsley by the look of it, clustered like hens at feeding time. The drizzle hadn't stopped them. They stood with umbrellas at jaunty angles, whispering gleefully. Agatha could hear snippets. Terrible business. Always something with that Fraith boy. Heard Mrs. Raisin's file caused a row. She spun round. "That is absolute nonsense." "Then why was your file there?" called a man Agatha disliked on principle. Before Agatha could construct a suitably scathing reply, Mrs. Bloxby appeared, serene as ever, umbrella steady in the breeze. "Mrs. Raisin," she said gently, stepping closer, "perhaps now isn't the time to shout at the entire village." "They're provoking me," Agatha said, though her voice softened somewhat under Mrs. Bloxby's calm regard. "Only because they're frightened," Mrs. Bloxby murmured. "A murder unsettles everyone." The word hung between them like an unwelcome guest. Agatha lit another cigarette, shielding the flame from the wind. She had developed the habit of smoking more vigorously whenever murder entered her morning. "This wouldn't have happened," she muttered, "if Charles hadn't played Lord Bountiful with my belongings." Charles bristled. "I wasn't. You were." "Well, I didn't kill anyone." "You'd struggle to kill a houseplant," Agatha said, "but you're still to blame for misplacing the file." Bill cleared his throat loudly. "May we focus?" Agatha exhaled smoke. "Fine. What do we know about Meredith?" Bill referred to a small notebook. "Moved to the area 6 months ago. Recently volunteered for that charity you're consulting for. Popular with most of the staff." Agatha sniffed. "Young, attractive, energetic. I can see why people liked her. Exhausting sort of girl." Bill ignored the commentary. "Someone at the charity argued with her yesterday afternoon. Witness saw them near the office car park." Agatha perked up like a bloodhound. "Who?" Bill flicked through the notes. "Not confirmed yet." "You're being deliberately vague," Agatha accused. "I don't want you meddling." "That ship sailed before breakfast." Charles leaned in. "Bill, old chap, perhaps tell her. She'll only badger you until you crack." Bill sighed. "Fine. A volunteer. Name pending, that's all." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "You're hiding something." "For your own safety," Bill said. "Do try, just this once, not to insert yourself into an active investigation." Agatha gave a short laugh. "Insert myself? My file is part of your investigation." Charles rubbed his temples. She does have a point. Not helping Charles, Bill muttered. A constable approached with gloves and a respectfully grim expression. He whispered something to Bill. Bill nodded. Right, he said. We need to take the body. Mrs. Raisin, please don't. I won't touch anything, Agatha said, hands raised. Yet. That's what worries me. Agatha drifted towards the shed door while Bill supervised the removal of the body. The shed interior smelled of damp wood and compost. Gardening tools hung in neat rows. Charles had a surprisingly efficient groundsman, and several sacks of fertilizer sat stacked in the corner. Nothing suggested a violent confrontation. Agatha noticed a single footprint inside the shed. Muddy, slightly smaller than her own. She crouched, peering. Doris edged beside her, whispering nervously, "Is that important?" "Everything is important until it isn't," Agatha replied. Charles appeared beside her. "I don't know why she'd be here. She never visited the shed." Agatha noted the flicker in his voice. "Are you sure, Charles?" He blinked. "Well, reasonably." "Reasonably is a coward's word," Agatha said. "Try again." Charles sighed. "I sometimes invite people on little tours of the estate. She might have been with a group once. And you forgot." "I forget all sorts of things. Life is calmer that way." Agatha rose. "You need a secretary." "You volunteer?" he said hopefully. "Absolutely not." The villagers still hovered by the gate, gossip sailing in waves. Someone loudly commented that it was always the posh ones you had to watch. Charles pretended not to hear. Mrs. Bloxby approached Agatha again, laying a gentle hand on her arm. "This poor young woman. It feels like something more complicated than a simple quarrel." "You think there's trouble at the charity?" Agatha asked. Mrs. Bloxby's eyes held a hint of sorrow. "I think people often hide their worst fears behind good intentions." Agatha considered this, heart tightening despite her best efforts. She hated when Mrs. Bloxby was right. It made her feel uncomfortably human. Bill called over. "Agatha, don't even think about—" "I already am thinking," she called back, "and I will continue to think." He muttered something unpolice-like under his breath. Agatha tucked the recovered file under her arm and surveyed the grounds one last time. Meredith Prowse had been dragged, placed and framed beside evidence that shouldn't have been there, and someone at the charity had argued with her. Agatha felt the familiar stirrings, dread, yes, but also the undeniable thrill of pursuit. "Come on, Charles," she said. "We've work to do." "Do we?" he groaned. "Yes," Agatha said, lighting another cigarette. "Someone at that charity knows far more than they're saying." And with the drizzle settling on her hair and gossip rising behind her like smoke, Agatha Raisin set off down the muddy path, hungry for answers, irritated at the world and determined to find whoever had turned her missing file into a murder clue. A weak winter sun dragged itself over Evesham as Agatha Raisin marched toward the charity office, her breath misting in the chilly air. The community building sat wedged between a hairdresser and a dreary insurance agency, its windows streaked with condensation. It looked like the sort of place where enthusiasm came to die. Agatha pushed open the door and found the interior no cheerier. A thin carpet, a scattering of mismatched chairs, and the faint smell of stale tea. Staff milled about, faces pale and movements jittery. Meredith's death hung over the office like damp laundry. A young receptionist whispered into a landline, shooting nervous glances around as though expecting the murderer to pop out from behind the filing cabinet. Agatha straightened her posture, tucked her recovered file under her arm, and adopted her firm PR expression. It was the only weapon she possessed that could shame people into politeness. "Good morning," she announced. "I'm here to continue our branding consultation." Several heads turned. A few staff members looked confused, as if branding were a scandalous crime. Others exchanged wary glances, as though Agatha herself had dragged Meredith behind Charles's potting shed. Frances Delaney stepped forward. The chairwoman resembled a determined walnut, small, tough, and unyielding. Her tight curls bounced with every irritated breath. "Mrs. Raisin," she said in a slightly too loud voice, "this is hardly an appropriate time." "On the contrary," Agatha replied sweetly, "the charity must put its best foot forward. Public confidence, image management, vital things." Frances's lips thinned. Meredith was always too pushy, too young, too ambitious. She never understood that small charities require steady hands, not grand ideas. Agatha recognized the tone. It wasn't grief, it was nuisance. Meredith's murder had inconvenienced the running of Francis's paperwork kingdom. "Did you know her well?" Agatha asked. "Well enough to know she needed reining in," Francis snapped, "and well enough to know she would never have come to harm if she'd listened to advice." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "She didn't strike me as the type who ignored advice. She struck me as the type who ignored fools." A few staff members gasped, delighted by the tension. Francis stared hard at Agatha, and for a second Agatha felt a flash of wicked pleasure. She lived for this sort of scrap. A young man shuffled forward, tall, thin, and with a nervous twitch to his hands. Justin Plowright. Agatha remembered him from a previous meeting, a volunteer who barely coped with opening envelopes. Today he looked ready to collapse. "Meredith knew something was wrong," Justin blurted before Francis could intercept. "She was looking at the accounts. She said something didn't add up." Francis rounded on him. "Justin, please do not repeat idle conjecture." "It wasn't idle," Justin insisted. "She said there were grants misallocated, duplicate invoices, payments labelled miscellaneous outreach that didn't make sense." Agatha felt a prickle of interest. Money always brought trouble, especially in cosy committees run by bossy women with control issues. "Did she say who she suspected?" Agatha asked. Justin hesitated. She planned to confront someone." "Someone here?" Agatha pressed. Francis clapped her hands sharply. "Enough! We will not descend into gossip." "You're running a charity in the Cotswolds," Agatha said. "Gossip is your core activity." Justin's face crumpled with guilt. Francis glared at him with such intensity that even Agatha felt a small pang of pity. A woman like Francis wielded shame the way knights wielded swords. Before Agatha could push further, Charles strode in. He swung open the door so enthusiastically he clipped a tall stack of leaflets, sending them cascading across the floor like startled pigeons. "Aggie," he declared, "I've come to provide moral support." Agatha wished the ground would swallow her. "Pick those up." "I shall," Charles said vaguely, making no attempt whatsoever. The staff stared at him as if royalty had wandered into a discount shop. Agatha's embarrassment grew. Charles always had that effect, appearing effortlessly charming while leaving her looking like a woman who dragged along a very pretty, very useless escort. "Do sit down," Francis said icily, pointing at a plastic chair. "I'd rather stand," Charles replied, adjusting his scarf with aristocratic indifference. Agatha cleared her throat. "If we may continue," she interviewed the staff with gentle prodding, then with increasingly pointed questions. The same story emerged. Meredith had been energetic, bright, determined, and occasionally irritating. She had also been poking around in finances that were supposed to remain safely unexamined. One volunteer, a round-faced woman with an air of perpetual apology, offered a red herring with trembling earnestness. "I saw Meredith arguing with an older gentleman outside 2 days ago," she said. "Tall chap, grey hair, smart coat." Agatha pounced. "Do you know who he was?" "No," the woman said, but she looked upset, very upset. "You're mistaken," Francis cut in sharply. "Meredith had no dealings with older men, none that concern this office." Something about the interruptions gnawed at Agatha. Francis guarded the charity as though it were a personal inheritance. As Agatha prepared to leave, the receptionist hurried over holding an envelope. "This came in the Morning Post," she said. "It's addressed to you." Agatha frowned. She didn't receive post here. The handwriting, looping and quick, looked familiar. Meredith's. Her stomach tightened. She tore the envelope open. Inside lay a single sheet. "If anything happens to me, look at the Stroud report." Agatha's pulse jumped. She folded the paper and slipped it into her coat pocket before anyone else could see, but Charles, tall, nosy, and blessed with inconvenient eyesight, leaned over her shoulder. "Stroud report," he said. "What's that?" "Nothing," Agatha snapped. "Mind your own business." "You're reading it in my presence, Aggie." "Your presence isn't invited," she muttered. Francis approached, eyes sharp. "Is everything all right?" Agatha smiled with poisonous sweetness. "Perfectly. I received something for my PR work." "May I see it?" "No." Francis stiffened, unused to being denied. "Mrs. Raisin, if this is related to Meredith—" "It isn't," Agatha lied. "And even if it were, I wouldn't be handing things to someone who shuts her volunteers up every 5 minutes." A tremor passed through the room. Staff pretended to busy themselves, ears pricking like startled hounds. Francis glared. "You overstep yourself." I usually do, Agatha replied. She gathered her belongings, leaflets, notebook, and her crucial file, and swept toward the door. Charles followed her like a decorative shadow, still smiling vaguely at the volunteers. Outside, Agatha lit a cigarette with quick fingers. The paper trembled slightly in the breeze. "Well," Charles said eagerly, "what's the Stroud report?" "Something Meredith wanted found," Agatha said, "and something someone else would rather stayed buried." "So we're investigating." "We?" Agatha scoffed. "I'm investigating. You're tagging along." "Same thing, really." Agatha exhaled smoke slowly. The words in Meredith's letter nagged at her like a persistent draft. If anything happens to me, something had indeed happened, and Agatha had the one clue the killer likely didn't know existed, a dangerous advantage and an irresistible lure. She brushed ash from her coat and set off down the pavement toward her car, determination tightening her stride. If there was a Stroud report hiding somewhere in the Cotswolds, Agatha Raisin intended to find it before the murderer realized she held the key. Behind her, Charles hurried to catch up. A sharp wind scudded over Castley by late afternoon, rattling hedges and needling through coats with spiteful efficiency. Agatha Raisin pushed open her cottage door with Charles at her heels, both of them trailing the grit of the village lane. The cottage was warm but chaotic, papers strewn, cushions fallen, and Hodge planted directly in the middle of the carpet like a large, judgmental ornament. "Don't look at me like that," Agatha muttered at him. "You contribute nothing to household management." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. Charles bent to fuss the cat, earning a rumbling purr. Agatha ignored the display of mutual adoration. She tossed her coat onto the nearest chair, lit a cigarette, and surveyed her desk for anything related to the mysterious Stroud report. Nothing surfaced except a half-empty mug of cold tea and a large sense of irritation. "The only Stroud I know," she said, exhaling smoke, "is Gerald Stroud, retired accountant, used to audit bits of charity work." "Dull man," Charles said, straightening. "He once cornered me at a village fete and delivered a 20-minute lecture on balanced books." "You attract dullness," Agatha said. "It clings to you like static." "Thank you," Charles replied mildly. Agatha snatched the landline handset and dialed Stroud's number. After several rings, a gravelly voice answered. "Gerald Stroud, this is Agatha Raisin. Meredith Prowse left me a note. Something about a report you reviewed." A pause crackled down the line. "Mrs. Raisin," Stroud said finally, "come at once, but you won't like what you hear." Agatha stiffened. "I rarely do." Charles watched her hang up. "Well?" "He wants us there immediately." "Us?" Charles brightened. "Splendid." "Don't be ridiculous," Agatha snapped. "You're coming because you'll only whine if I don't include you." "That's true," he said cheerfully. They left the cottage, dodging a gust of cold wind, and climbed into Agatha's hatchback. Charles offered to drive, but Agatha refused. She disliked handing over control, even when Charles was marginally better behind the wheel. The road to Morton-in-Marsh wound through bare trees and quiet fields. Winter had drained the landscape of colour, leaving the world looking faintly waterlogged and tired. Agatha felt vaguely the same. Stroud lived in a narrow brick house squeezed between two broader ones, like a man trying to stand tall beside giants. When Agatha knocked, the door creaked open at once. Gerald Stroud appeared, thin, grey-haired, spectacles perched halfway down his nose. His face carried the pallor of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Come in," he whispered, glancing down the street. The hallway smelled of old paper and lavender polish. The heating appeared set to miser, and Agatha immediately regretted not wearing a thicker jumper. Stroud ushered them into a sitting room lined with bulging shelves, ledger books stacked on the coffee table, each labelled with suspicious neatness. "Meredith came here 3 days ago," he said, voice trembling. "She had questions about payments. She'd been asked to input some figures. She didn't like what she saw." "What exactly?" Agatha asked. Stroud pushed his spectacles higher. Grants meant for outreach programs were redirected, invoices duplicated, money funneled into a private bank account. Agatha leaned forward. "Whose account?" Stroud's hands shook. "I don't know. Or rather, I know, but I daren't say." "You must," Agatha insisted. "Meredith was murdered." Stroud paled. "I feared as much. She told me she'd confront someone. She was brave. Too brave." Charles cleared his throat gently. "You could help the police." "The police?" Stroud whispered. "You don't understand. If the person responsible learns I spoke to Meredith—" He stopped. His eyes darted to the window. "They already know," he murmured. "They must." Agatha felt a chill. "What makes you say that?" "Because this morning—" He opened a drawer and produced a small stone wrapped in tissue. The tissue peeled back to reveal a jagged chunk of garden gravel. "Someone threw this through my window at dawn. No note, no message, just this." Agatha exchanged a look with Charles. She stepped to the window and saw the taped repair on the outside glass, a small, sharp-edged hole. "Warning," she murmured. "Quite," Stroud said shakily. "I don't want trouble." Agatha exhaled slowly. "But trouble's arrived whether you want it or not." Stroud clasped his hands. "Meredith trusted me. She said if anything happened to her, the truth must come out. But I'm old. I don't have the stomach for danger." "You're an accountant," Agatha said. "You never had the stomach for danger." Stroud let out a thin, terrified laugh. Agatha immediately regretted the remark, though she would never admit it. They stayed a few minutes longer, extracting what little Stroud would confess. He had copies of suspicious documents, but refused to hand them over. Fear had wrapped itself so tightly around him that he could barely breathe. As they stepped outside to leave, a sudden crack shattered the tense air. Glass exploded behind them. Agatha whirled just in time to see the lounge window spiderwebbing with fresh fractures. "Someone's still here!" she cried. Charles grabbed her arm. "Don't run towards it, Aggie." But she was already halfway across the garden path, scanning hedges and driveways. A tall figure in a dark coat sprinted from between two houses, vaulting a low fence with desperate speed. "Oi!" Agatha shouted. The figure vanished down an alleyway. Charles reached her side, panting lightly. "You'll get yourself killed charging at shadows," he muttered. "They're not shadows," Agatha snapped. "They're murderers with terrible aim." "Fortunately for us," Charles said. Stroud hovered in the doorway, shaking so hard his glasses rattled. "You must go. Please. I can't. Please." Agatha softened, only slightly. "Fine, but lock the door." Back in the car, she lit a cigarette with unsteady fingers. Charles buckled in, expression uncharacteristically serious. "This is dangerous," he said quietly. "Good," Agatha murmured, blowing smoke out the window. "I'd hate to be bored." "Meredith tried to expose something," Charles said. "Someone didn't want her to. Someone still doesn't want her to." The drive back to Carsley passed in a taut silence. Agatha replayed Stroud's trembling voice, the smashed glass, the fleeing figure. A name gnawed at her thoughts. Someone far above Meredith's pay grade, as Roy had hinted. Roy appeared, right on cue, as Agatha parked outside her cottage. He tottered down the lane wearing a flamboyant scarf and holding a cappuccino like a sacred relic. "Darling," he cried, sweeping in, "I've heard everything. The body, the file, the shed. You attract disasters like men attract midlife crises." Agatha pinched the bridge of her nose. "Roy, why are you here?" "I came for moral support. And gossip, mostly gossip." He leaned closer. "Meredith had a relationship, you know. Someone awfully important. I heard from a friend of a friend." "Who?" Agatha snapped. Roy fluttered. "No idea, darling, but very hush-hush. Scandal lurking everywhere. Delicious." Agatha sighed. "Roy, that's useless." "You're welcome," Charles smirked. Roy preened. Agatha wished briefly for a moment of solitary dignity, then remembered she rarely managed dignity even when alone. As evening settled like a damp quilt over Carsley, Roy drifted off to spread further excitement. Charles offered to stay, but Agatha waved him away. "I need quiet," she said. "And competence." "Rude," Charles replied, but kissed the air near her cheek before strolling off. Agatha entered her cottage, exhaustion gnawing at her shoulders. She set her file on the desk. Hodge leapt onto it immediately, flattening every sheet beneath his considerable bulk. "You're not helping," she told him. Hodge yawned. Later, she settled on the sofa with a small gin, lights dimmed. The day had frayed her nerves more than she cared to admit. She dozed briefly, until Hodge's furious yowling jolted her upright. Something scraped at the back door. Agatha's heart pounded. She crept into the kitchen, Hodge still growling like a very small, furry tiger. A shadow darted across the frosted glass panel. Then footsteps, rapid, fleeing, echoed down the garden path. Agatha threw the door open in time to see only a dark shape leaping over the gate and vanishing into the night. She stood in the cold air, hands trembling slightly. Someone had tried to break in. Someone who knew she had the Stroud note. She swallowed hard, lit a cigarette, and let the smoke steady her shaking breath. "Well," she muttered, "now it's personal." Hodge rubbed against her leg, tail flicking like a warning. Agatha stared into the dark garden. The murderer wasn't finished, and neither was she. Carsley woke to a thin drizzle that clung to hedges like gossip. The village never handled murder quietly. It preferred to broadcast speculation with the efficiency of a parish loudspeaker. By mid-morning, the WI hall hummed with voices. Women gathered in tight clusters, eyes gleaming, cups of tea forgotten as they whispered about Meredith Prowse's demise. Agatha Raisin sat stiffly near the back, arms folded, regretting every second of her decision to attend. Mrs. Bloxby had coaxed her. "It will do you good to hear what people are saying." But Agatha suspected the vicar's wife merely didn't trust her not to stir trouble elsewhere. Peggy Troughton, a thin wisp of a volunteer with watery eyes, stood at the front. "I just can't believe it," she trembled. "Poor Meredith. She was so ambitious." The way she said ambitious carried the bitterness of someone who had applied for a promotion and been laughed out of the room. "Ambitious girls come to grief," muttered an older woman. "They fly too high." "Rubbish," Agatha snapped. "She was murdered. That's not ambition. That's someone wanting her silent." A few ladies flinched at the directness. Agatha enjoyed that. But then another voice chimed in. "I heard she was at a private dinner at Charles Fraith's manor just 2 nights before she died." Agatha whipped round. "What?" "Oh, yes," the woman continued happily. "A friend of my cousin's dog walker saw her going in. Quite glamorous, apparently. Candlelight, wine, the works." Agatha shot to her feet. "Excuse me." Mrs. Bloxby gave her a worried glance, but Agatha was already out the door, marching into the drizzle like a woman betrayed. She headed straight across the green, ignoring Doris Simpson waving at her from behind a basket of laundry. Charles Fraith was exactly where she expected, leaning against his vintage convertible, pretending to check the oil while actually admiring his reflection in the window. "Charles!" Agatha barked. He glanced up brightly. "Aggie, lovely morning, isn't it?" "Don't lovely morning me." Agatha jabbed a finger at him. "Did you have Meredith Prowse to dinner 2 nights ago?" Charles blinked. "Twice." "Ah, that." "Yes, that." "Well, I might have forgotten to mention." "Forgotten!" Agatha exploded. "You forget umbrellas. You forget shopping lists. You do not forget hosting charity volunteers at your manor before one of them turns up dead." Charles looked genuinely uncomfortable. "It wasn't just Meredith. I invited several people, a little gathering to talk about fundraising." "And you didn't think this mattered?" "I didn't think you'd care," she snapped. "If a woman dies after visiting your home, I care." He winced. "Point taken." A flicker of guilt crossed his handsome face, irritatingly charming even when cornered. Agatha hated that flicker. It made her stomach twist in ways entirely unhelpful. Before she could continue interrogating him, Bill Wong strode up the lane, coat-soaked, expression grim. "Mrs. Raisin," he said, nodding. "Charles, I need a word." Agatha folded her arms. "If this is about me being careful, don't bother." "No," Bill said. "It's worse. The financial mess Meredith uncovered wasn't small potatoes. We're talking tens of thousands of pounds." Agatha let out a low whistle. "That's a proper motive." "Exactly why you should step back," Bill said. "Someone desperate might do anything." Agatha laughed. "Bill, Danger and I are on intimate terms." "Which is what worries me," he muttered. Charles smirked. "She is rather good at putting herself in peril." "Not helping, Charles," Bill sighed. Agatha brushed a lock of hair back, ignoring the rain plastering it to her forehead. "So, who had access to the charity accounts?" "Staff, volunteers, anyone trusted with paperwork," Bill said, "which makes a long list." "Including Francis Delaney," Agatha said. Bill gave her a sharp look. "I didn't say that." "You didn't need to." He exhaled with the despair of a man who knew he would never, under any earthly circumstances, keep Agatha Raisin out of a murder investigation. "Try to stay alive," he muttered, before leaving them to the rain. Agatha turned on her heel. "Come on, Charles, we're going back to the charity office." "Now?" "Yes, now, before Francis faints from the effort of hiding evidence." The office in Evesham felt even gloomier than the day before. The air smelt of damp coats and cheap biscuits. Staff pretended to work, though their whispering paused the moment Agatha entered. Frances Delaney rose behind her desk, face pinched. "Mrs. Raisin, unless you're here to brand a memorial service, I must ask you to leave." "Oh, I'll leave once you explain why Meredith's desk was broken into." Frances blinked sharply. "Broken into? Don't be absurd." Agatha marched to the workstation and pointed. The top drawer hung open, its lock splintered. Files were missing, spaces too neat to be accidental. "Burglars," Frances declared, "obviously." "Spare me," Agatha said. "Burglars don't target mediocre admin." Justin Plowright drifted over, wringing his hands. His cheeks were pale, his eyes darting nervously. "I saw something," he whispered. Frances froze. "Justin!" "She and Francis argued," Justin blurted. "The day before she died. It was loud. Everyone heard." Agatha perked up. "What about?" "Money," Justin whispered. "Meredith accused her of hiding something." "Nonsense," Francis snapped. "Justin misunderstood, and Meredith misunderstood more." "Convenient," Agatha said. Francis's face reddened. "Mrs. Raisin, your interference is unwelcome." "So, is murder," Agatha said sweetly. Justin leaned closer to Agatha. "And Meredith sort of flirted with Charles." Agatha stiffened. "What?" "She said he had potential as a benefactor. She meant, well," Justin reddened. "She seemed fond of him." Agatha felt an irrational spark of jealousy flicker in her chest. She extinguished it immediately, or tried to. Charles, unfortunately, had heard. "Oh no," he said hastily. "I assure you." "Shut it," Agatha growled. At that moment, Peggy Troughton appeared from behind a filing cabinet, clutching a damp tissue. Peggy always looked as though she'd been recently startled by a church bell, and today was no exception. "I knew this would happen," Peggy wailed. "Meredith wanted my role. She thought she could take over everything." She always smiled, that smug smile, and acted like she was better. Agatha eyed her. Peggy's grief was real, but her self-pity even more so. "Did you dislike her enough to harm her?" Peggy gasped. "How dare you? I'm a gentle soul." "Gentle souls often snap," Agatha said, "especially when threatened." Peggy burst into tears. Justin rushed to comfort her, while Francis threw Agatha a murderous glare. Agatha left the office before she caused an actual fistfight. Charles followed with the look of a man who'd wandered into an emotional storm without waterproof clothing. "That was harsh," he murmured. "She'll live," Agatha said, "unlike Meredith." The drizzle returned as they stepped outside, sliding down Agatha's cheeks like the world's least helpful moisturizer. She lit a cigarette, inhaling deeply. "There's something wrong here," she muttered. "Francis is hiding something. Justin is terrified. Peggy is useless. And you?" "What about me?" Charles asked warily. "You forgot to mention that dinner." He sighed. "Aggie, really? Not now," she cut in. They crossed the car park. Agatha's mind spun through suspects like a Rolodex with a vendetta. Everyone had motives: jealousy, ambition, fear, money. Her landline began ringing the moment she stepped through her cottage door. Hodge lifted his head from the sofa cushion but did not move. Cats rarely felt compelled to answer phones. Agatha snatched the receiver. "Yes?" There was breathing. Heavy. Intentional. "Who is this?" she demanded. A low voice hissed through the crackling line. "Stop digging, or you'll end up like her." Agatha froze. Her heart slammed painfully once, then again. Outside, the drizzle ticked against the windows like a warning. "Coward," she snarled into the phone. "Come say it to my face." But the line had already gone dead. Charles appeared behind her. "Aggie, what happened?" She set the receiver down carefully. "Someone thinks they can frighten me." "Can they?" he asked softly. Agatha hesitated. The truth pressed close. Yes, she was frightened. But fear had never stopped her, only sharpened her temper. She lit a cigarette with steady fingers. "No," she said, "they can't." Outside, the grey afternoon thickened into evening. Hodge stretched, uninterested in human threats. Agatha stood at the window, gaze fixed on the rain-slicked lane, suspicion stirring like a restless fox. Someone in Carsley was lying, and she intended to find them. A thin veil of evening fog settled over Carsley as Agatha Raisin adjusted her coat and glared at Charles's manor. It loomed ahead, all honeyed stone and smug grandeur, its windows glowing with candlelight like a house that never doubted its own importance. Charles had insisted on hosting a little dinner for harmony. Agatha suspected it was really a performance staged for his amusement and her irritation. She marched up the steps, heels clicking with fury. Charles opened the door, looking annoyingly handsome in a tailored jacket. "Aggie, you're early," he beamed. "No, you're late," she snapped, brushing past him. The entrance hall was warm and grand, the air scented with polished wood and Charles's unnecessary cologne. Agatha assessed the table in the dining room, a long polished surface laid with silver cutlery, too many wineglasses, and enough candles to set off the smoke alarm. "You've gone to ridiculous lengths," she muttered. "Diplomacy requires atmosphere," Charles said smoothly. "Diplomacy requires honesty," Agatha corrected, "which is why you'll never succeed at it." Guests trickled in with varying degrees of awkwardness. Frances Delaney arrived first, chin high, curls tightly lacquered. She scanned the room like a general assessing enemy territory. "Mr. Fraith," she said stiffly. "What an elaborate setting." "Thank you," Charles replied, oblivious to insult. Justin Plowright followed, pale and shivering, his shirt collar visibly damp with nerves. He stumbled over the threshold, apologized 3 times, then stood rigidly in the hallway as though awaiting execution. Peggy Troughton trailed behind him, clutching a small handbag to her chest like a fragile animal. She gasped at every candle. Last to arrive was Bill Wong, looking as though he regretted every moment of his involvement. "Evening, Mrs. Raisin," he murmured. "I don't know why I let him talk me into this." "Because you're polite," Agatha said. "A flaw." "Noted," Bill sighed. They all gathered in the dining room, where Charles performed the role of gracious host with infuriating ease. Agatha took her seat with a muttered complaint about the draught. Frances sat opposite, lips pursed into a thin line that suggested superiority and indigestion. Justin perched beside Peggy, gripping his water glass in both hands. Bill settled at the far end, pretending calm. Dinner began innocently enough. Charles served a carrot and coriander soup, which Peggy slurped nervously. Frances dabbed her lips with a linen napkin after every mouthful, as though attempting to erase evidence of food. Justin drank water, as though hoping to drown his own anxiety. Agatha observed every movement. She noticed the way Frances avoided Justin's eyes. She noticed Peggy watching Frances with something close to resentment. She noticed Charles watching her, which annoyed her more than anything. When the main course arrived, Charles cleared his throat and said, in his most diplomatic tone, "We all know Meredith's death has unsettled the charity. I thought a calm discussion might help." Frances dropped her fork with a loud clatter. "Mr. Fraith, I hardly think a dinner party is the setting for investigative speculation." "It's not speculation," Charles replied. "It's fact. Money is missing. Quite a lot of money." Justin paled. Peggy stared at her plate. Frances stiffened. Agatha leaned forward, inhaling the scent of roasted chicken and tension. "Someone benefited from Meredith's silence," Frances glared. "Mrs. Raisin, I hardly think—" "You hardly think at all if you believe this isn't connected," Agatha said pleasantly. Justin downed his wine in one gulp. Peggy reached for his arm and he nearly jumped out of his chair. Bill attempted diplomacy. "Let's not point fingers. Yet." "Why not?" Agatha asked. "They're all in the room." Frances bristled. "Meredith was manipulative. She twisted facts. She upset people. She was—" "Dead," Agatha finished, "which tends to spoil one's ambitions." Frances's mouth opened and shut like an indignant goldfish. Justin stared at his hands. Peggy looked ready to faint. Dessert arrived, a trifling thing with berries and cream. Agatha used the distraction to slide away from the table, mumbling something about checking the powder room. Charles raised an eyebrow as she slipped quietly into the corridor. She padded down to Charles's study, her heels silent on the thick rug. The room smelled of old books and cedar oil, with shelves crowded by leather-bound volumes Charles probably never read. She flicked through papers on his desk, finding only bills and the sort of correspondence aristocrats use to maintain their social web. She checked the drawers. The bottom one stuck, but after a firm tug, it opened to reveal a stack of drafts and abandoned letters. One sheet caught her eye instantly. Meredith's handwriting. "Thank you for believing in my ideas. It means more than I can say." Agatha's stomach twisted. She read the line again, fury prickling her skin. "Believing in her ideas," she hissed. "What ideas?" She folded the letter sharply and slipped it into her sleeve. A ridiculous action, perhaps, but she didn't trust herself not to tear it up on the spot. Footsteps echoed nearby. Agatha shut the drawer, smoothed her blouse, and stepped out of the study with the practiced grace of someone who had done far too much snooping. She found Charles in the hall, giving her a questioning look. "Get lost?" "Checking the loo," she replied briskly. "Down the other end," Charles said gently. Agatha pushed past him. "Your house is stupidly large." Dinner was deteriorating rapidly when she returned. Justin was fidgeting so violently he had knocked over his glass. Peggy dabbed at the spill with a serviette. Francis stared pointedly at the ceiling, jaw clamped tight. Then Justin snapped. "You bullied her," he shouted, finger shaking as he pointed at Francis. "You bullied Meredith every day," Francis gasped. "She was difficult. She needed direction." "You humiliated her," Justin insisted. "In front of everyone. She wanted to quit." "Nonsense," Francis barked. Peggy sniffed loudly. "She made me feel small. Meredith did. Always showing off." "Showing off?" Agatha repeated. "She was murdered. That's quite a step beyond boastfulness." The room erupted in overlapping accusations, defensive retorts, and 2 or 3 poorly timed sobs from Peggy. Charles clapped his hands loudly until silence fell. "Enough," he said. "This is supposed to clear the air." "It's clearing nothing," Agatha replied, "except my patience." Francis rose abruptly. "I will not stay where my integrity is questioned." "Integrity requires evidence," Agatha said. "So far, all I've seen is your temper." Francis stormed out, Justin trailing after her in a flustered mess. Peggy fluttered behind, murmuring something about needing fresh air. Bill stayed seated, rubbing his temples. "Why do I get the feeling," Bill muttered, "that Meredith wasn't especially popular?" "Popularity doesn't kill," Agatha said. "Secrets do." Charles collected plates with a weary sigh. "Well, that went poorly." "You think?" Agatha retorted. "You could show gratitude," Charles said, "for my attempt at harmony." "Harmony?" Agatha scoffed. "You practically set a fox loose in a henhouse." "You were the fox," Bill said. Agatha ignored both of them. A prickling sensation crept along her spine, an instinct she trusted more than logic. She stepped to the nearest window and peered outside. The fog had thickened, rolling across the garden like cautious smoke. Something caught her eye. Footprints. Fresh, muddy footprints leading away from the manor into the shadowed woods. "Charles," she said sharply, "did any of your guests arrive on foot?" "Of course not," he said. "Everyone drove." Agatha's pulse quickened. She stepped onto the patio stones, leaning closer to the grass. The footprints were long, purposeful, heading straight for the tree line. Someone had been watching. Someone not invited. She straightened slowly, cigarette already between her fingers as she lit it with a trembling flame. "What now?" Charles asked. Agatha exhaled smoke, the night air carrying her irritation into the gloom. "Someone came to your precious dinner uninvited." "How flattering," Charles murmured. "Charles," she said coldly, "this isn't romance, it's murder." Bill appeared at her side, following her gaze. "We'll need to check the woods." Agatha nodded. "Tomorrow, in daylight." But, as she stepped back into the warm manor, a whisper of dread scraped at her nerves. Someone had spied on them, and someone wanted to hear what they said. Hodge would have understood the danger instantly, she thought. Cats always sensed watchers. She closed the door behind her, carrying that cold awareness with her into the flickering candlelight. Dawn crept over Castley in a grey sulk, the sort of reluctant morning that made the Cotswolds appear older and more suspicious than usual. Agatha Raisin stood at the edge of Charles's estate, collar up, cigarette lit, contemplating the mud-sodden path into the woods. Charles hovered beside her in a thick scarf, looking like a man deeply regretting offering help. Bill Wong stood on her other side, notebook ready, expression grim. "It rained all night," Bill said. "Watch your footing." "My footing is none of your concern," Agatha muttered, and immediately stepped into a patch of sludge deep enough to swallow one shoe. She yanked her foot free with a squelch that felt personally insulting. They trudged into the trees, which dripped mournfully in the early light. The air smelt of wet bark and moss. Agatha disliked woods on principle. They reminded her of school nature walks and other ghastly enforced wholesomeness. "Over here," Bill called. They reached a clearing where the mud bore fresh marks, boot prints, broken twigs, disturbed leaves. Bill crouched, picking up 2 damp cigarette ends with gloved fingers. He held them out to Agatha. "Same brand Francis smokes." Agatha snorted. "Too obvious." "Sometimes obvious is correct." "Not in murder. Murderers don't drop clues like confetti." She gave Bill a pointed look. "Someone planted them." Charles leaned in, squinting. "For once I agree with Aggie." Agatha blinked at him. "Mark the calendar." They moved deeper into the woods. Rainwater dripped steadily from branches, pattering onto their heads with irritating precision. Agatha's hair frizzed in all the worst places. "This path leads to the old service road," Charles murmured. "People could watch the manor from here." "Someone did," Agatha said. "Last night." They pressed on, and after several minutes Charles stepped abruptly backwards. "Good Lord," he whispered. Gerald Stroud lay half-hidden at the base of a tree, slumped like a rag doll. His coat was torn, his glasses crooked, and his face streaked with mud. Bill rushed forward, crouching beside him. "Stroud, can you hear me?" The accountant groaned faintly, lifting one trembling hand. "Help!" Agatha knelt, ignoring the mud that seeped instantly into her trousers. "What happened?" Stroud's breath came in shallow bursts. Someone tried to force me into a car, pulled me from the road. I fought, ran, slipped." "Did you see their face?" Bill asked. Stroud shook his head weakly. "Gloved hand, over my mouth, dragged me." Agatha exchanged a sharp look with Charles. This wasn't random. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. Stroud shivered violently. Agatha took his arm, steadying him. "You shouldn't be here alone." "I had to get away," he whispered. "They know I have the documents. The copies. I hid them. Somewhere safe." His shaking worsened. "If they find them, I'm done." "Where did you hide them?" Agatha asked. Stroud's eyes darted wildly. No, I can't. If I tell—" "You must," Agatha urged. "Meredith trusted you. Do right by her." "I told someone else," Stroud blurted suddenly. "Someone you know." Agatha's breath caught. "Who?" But before Stroud could speak again, the brush behind them rustled sharply. A branch snapped. Agatha spun, eyes narrowing. "Who's there?" Only silence. Then another rustle, further away now. Agatha bolted toward the sound. Bill shouted after her, but she ignored him, sprinting across the slick ground. The trees blurred. Her foot skidded on a patch of mud and she went down hard, hands sinking into cold sludge. "Oh, damn everything," she growled, pushing herself up. Whoever had fled was gone, swallowed by the woods. Bill and Charles caught up, both breathless for different reasons. Bill from running, Charles from horror at the state of his shoes. "Aggie, you all right?" Charles asked. "No," she snapped, brushing mud from her coat. "But I'm not dead. Small mercies." They returned to Stroud, who had managed to sit up, though he shook like a leaf. Bill arranged transport to the local surgery. Stroud clutched Agatha's sleeve. Don't look for the documents," he whispered. "If they know—" Agatha squeezed his hand. "They already know." Stroud's eyes filled with terror. The ambulance arrived moments later, whisking him away through the trees. Agatha watched the flashing lights fade, a knot forming in her stomach. "He's hiding something," she said. "Something huge." "Something worth killing for," Bill added. Charles touched Agatha's elbow. "We should get you cleaned up. You look like you've wrestled a swamp." "I nearly did," she muttered, and lost. Back in Carsley, Agatha changed into dry clothes and dragged herself to the vicarage, where Mrs. Bloxby welcomed her with a warm smile and a pot of tea. The vicar's wife always managed to look serene, as though she walked a few inches above earthly chaos. "You look tired, Mrs. Raisin," she said, ushering her to the cosy sitting room. "Because someone tried to drug, kidnap, or terrify a retired accountant," Agatha replied. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea with steady hands. "You seem shaken." "Nonsense," Agatha lied. "I don't shake, I simmer." Mrs. Bloxby hid a smile. "Tell me everything." Agatha explained the morning, the planted cigarette ends, the attack on Stroud, the mysterious person watching the dinner, the odd confession about someone else knowing. Mrs. Bloxby listened quietly, her calm presence soothing Agatha in ways she'd never admit. "It sounds," Mrs. Bloxby said gently, "as though Meredith trusted someone she perhaps shouldn't. Someone close, someone who may now feel cornered." Agatha stared into her tea. I keep thinking the killer's nearby, watching. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. Fear makes people desperate, but desperation creates mistakes. You'll find them. Agatha felt a flicker of gratitude. Mrs. Bloxby had a way of making danger sound like a mild inconvenience, like an overdue library book. I must go, Agatha said. I've mud to scrub off my carpet. Be careful, Mrs. Bloxby murmured. Never, Agatha replied. She returned home at dusk, the sky deepening to bruised lilac. Carsley lay quiet, lamps glowing through cottage windows, the air thick with the smell of damp wood smoke. She felt strangely watched as she approached her front door. Inside, Hodge greeted her with a single disdainful meow. Agatha bent to stroke him, relieved by his familiar solidity. At least you care, she murmured. Hodge blinked slowly, which Agatha chose to interpret as affection rather than contempt. She settled at her kitchen table, lighting a cigarette and replaying Stroud's words. I told someone else too. Someone you know. Who? Francis? Justin? Peggy? Even Charles? She hated the thought, but jealousy and guilt made her imagination unhelpful. A soft scrape interrupted her thoughts. Something slid under the door. Agatha froze. Hodge hissed, fur puffing. She rose cautiously, crossed the room and bent to pick up the object. An envelope. No name. Thin, cheap paper. She opened it. Inside lay a single handwritten note. We need to talk. Midnight. Charles's potting shed. Agatha stared at the words as a cold thrill ran through her. Someone wanted a meeting. Someone who knew she'd come. She folded the note, heart beating faster. Well, Hodge, she murmured, it seems the night will be interesting. Hodge yawned as though murder appointments were beneath him. Agatha lit another cigarette, smoke curling toward the low kitchen ceiling. Midnight, the potting shed, a stranger waiting in the dark, and Agatha Raisin, determined and furious, would be there. The night settled over Carsley in a thick, brooding hush, the sort of quiet that made even the hedgerows lean inward to listen. Agatha Raisin strode across Charles Fraith's estate with a torch in one hand and fury in the other. A thin wind cut across the grass, carrying the smell of damp earth and the sharper smell of Agatha's indignation. Charles trudged beside her, coat flapping, muttering complaints about dew and mud and the cruelty of midnight appointments. Agatha ignored him. She had threatened to tell the WI about the time he stole her moisturizer, only because it smelled expensive, he'd insisted, and that had silenced his objections. The potting shed loomed ahead, a dark outline against the faint moonlight. Its windows were black, its roof sagging like a sulking child. Meredith Prowse's body had been found beside it only days before. The memory made the air feel heavier. "Remind me," Charles whispered, "why we're doing this." "Because someone invited me," Agatha snapped, "and because I'm not letting them think I'm frightened." Charles sighed and, "You are frightened. I'm irritated, which is worse." She reached the shed door, pausing as the torchlight skimmed across the peeling paint. Her hand tightened on the latch. "Ready?" she murmured. "No," Charles replied promptly. She opened the door before he could escape. The scent of cold soil and mildew drifted out. Agatha stepped in, torch sweeping across broken flower pots, muddy tools, and abandoned seed trays. The place looked as though someone had left in a hurry or never cleaned, which was equally likely for Charles. "This is where Meredith died," Agatha murmured. Even saying it aloud made her skin prickle. Charles shifted uneasily. "Don't say it like that. It sounds ghostly." "Good." The torch beam flickered across a shadow in the far corner. Agatha tensed. A figure stepped forward. Justin Plowright. His clothes were rumpled, face pale, eyes darting like a trapped rabbit's. "Mrs. Raisin," he whispered. "Please, don't tell Bill I'm here." Agatha angled the light at him sharply. "You left that note," Justin nodded, wringing his hands. "I didn't know who else to ask. You're fearless." "Flattery won't save you," Agatha warned. "Start talking." Justin gulped. "Meredith trusted me. She told me about the fraud. She said she had proof, documents, bank papers. She asked me to hide them for her." "Where?" Agatha demanded. I don't have them now," Justin stammered. "I panicked when she died. I thought someone would come for me. I hid them in 3 different places. Then I moved them again. And then I couldn't remember where I put them all." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Brilliant." "Please," Justin begged. "I didn't kill her, But someone thinks I know too much. Who? Agatha asked. Justin swallowed. I saw someone the night she died. I was walking back from the community hall. I cut across the field, and I saw Frances Delaney near the estate. She was sneaking around. She had a torch. She was headed toward the potting shed. Charles made a low sound. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Frances again. She hates Meredith, Justin whispered. She hated her ambition, her confidence. And you waited until now to tell us? Agatha snapped. I was scared. You're still scared, Agatha said dryly. Justin opened his mouth to respond, but the moment froze. A heavy shadow passed across the shed window. Charles stiffened. What was that? Agatha switched off her torch instantly, plunging the room into darkness. They held their breath. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Then, the rattle of the shed door, a firm, deliberate rattle, as though someone tested the latch. Agatha pressed herself against the wall, one hand gripping Justin's sleeve. Charles stood very still, his breath shallow. Another rattle. The doorknob jerked sharply. They know I'm here, Justin whimpered. Shut up, Agatha hissed. For a long moment, the only sound was rain ticking on the shed roof. Then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, retreating. The shadow moved away from the window and vanished into the night. Agatha waited several seconds more before turning the torch back on. Justin bolted upright like a startled hare. I have to go, he gasped. They'll kill me. Justin. Agatha reached out, but he pulled free. No, I can't stay. He shot out the door and disappeared into the night, feet slapping across wet grass. Agatha let out a long, furious breath. Idiot boy. Now he's even more of a target. Charles exhaled shakily. Aggie, perhaps we shouldn't be doing midnight meetings with panicked men in murder sheds. Oh, now he's sensible, Agatha muttered. Where was this caution earlier? Charles leaned against a shelf, trying to regain his composure. So, Frances was seen near here the night of the murder. Too convenient, Agatha said. Too neat. You think Justin made it up? No. I think someone wanted Justin to see that. Frances is being framed, or she's being used. Charles rubbed his temples. Aggie, when you make sense, it's almost disturbing. Don't get sentimental, Agatha replied. They stepped outside. The night air hit them cold and sharp. The estate grounds stretched quiet and dark, every shadow a suspicion. Someone knew we'd come, Agatha murmured. Someone's watching. Perhaps we should, Charles began. No, Agatha cut in. If they wanted to kill us, they'd have tried. They wanted to scare us, which means they're desperate, Charles eyed her. And what do desperate killers do? Make mistakes, Agatha said, and I'll be waiting. They walked back toward the manor. Agatha felt every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind. Her nerves prickled, sharpened by adrenaline and annoyance. Charles stayed close, for once asking no questions. You're unusually quiet, Agatha remarked. I'm contemplating the life choices that brought me to this potting shed at midnight, Charles said solemnly. You're whinging, Agatha corrected, only internally. When they reached her cottage, Hodge greeted Agatha with a disdainful meow. The cat stared at Charles like one judges a waiter who has brought the wrong wine. Don't look at me like that, Charles muttered. Agatha scooped Hodge up, burying her face briefly in his fur. At least someone here appreciates me. Hodge flicked an ear in ambiguity. Charles lingered awkwardly. Aggie, be careful. Agatha arched a brow. You be careful. You're part of this circus now. He sighed. Good night, then. She closed the door behind him and leaned against it. The torch still hung from her wrist. Her pulse felt loud in her ears. She stroked Hodge, who purred despite himself. Frances is too obvious, she murmured. Justin is too scared. Stroud is too mysterious. And someone is watching all of us. She set Hodge down and moved into the kitchen, lighting a cigarette. Smoke curled upward, soft and familiar. She paced, replaying Justin's words. Frances sneaking around the estate. Documents hidden. Someone else knows. Her thoughts tangled, but one conclusion stood firm. The killer was getting nervous. And nervous killers acted quickly. Agatha stubbed out her cigarette and forced herself to prepare for sleep. But she barely dozed. Every creak in the cottage made her tense. Every shadow looked suspicious. She drifted into a light, uneasy rest, until her landline rang. Agatha jolted upright. The clock read 5:14 a.m. She snatched the receiver. "What now?" Bill's weary voice answered. "Sorry, Mrs. Raisin. I thought you'd want to know." "Tell me." "Gerald Stroud is missing," Bill said grimly. "He vanished from the hospital during the night." Agatha froze. "Gone?" she repeated. "Completely. Nurses say he left quietly. No one saw him go." Agatha's cigarette burned forgotten in the ashtray. "He's running from someone," she murmured. "Or running towards something," Bill said. "Either way, we need to find him." Agatha hung up and stood still for several long seconds. Hodge wandered in, stretching luxuriously before heading to his food bowl. "You're right, Hodge," she whispered. "No rest for the wicked. Or for me." She reached for her coat. Stroud was missing. A murderer was watching, and midnight secrets were only the beginning. Carsley woke beneath a bruised sky, the early light thin and unfriendly. Agatha Raisin stood in her kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of strong tea, staring at the condensation creeping down the window pane like suspicious footprints. She hadn't slept. Not properly. Too many shadows, too many clues, too many fools. Hodge sat on the table, tail flicking in disapproval. He disliked early mornings, noise, and Agatha's tendency to mutter at the kettle as though it owed her money. The telephone rang. Agatha grabbed it, expecting a sales call. Only misery came this early. "Mrs. Raisin?" Bill Wong sounded exhausted. "No sign of Stroud yet." "Still missing," Agatha said flatly. "He's becoming a full-time occupation." "CCTV shows him leaving the hospital quietly just after 3, Bill went on. "No taxi, no car, no witness who'll admit to seeing him. He's vanished." "Then he's gone to fetch those documents," Agatha said. "He'll want them before someone else does." Bill hesitated. "I've asked units to look around Morton in Marsh, but—" "I'll do it," Agatha cut in. "Mrs. Raisin, you need evidence. I need answers." "Please be careful," Bill said. "He's terrified. Fearful people can be unpredictable." "You're assuming I'm less unpredictable," Agatha replied, and hung up. Charles arrived 10 minutes later, hair damp, scarf crooked, looking as if he had been dragged behind his own car. "You didn't sleep," he observed. "Spare me," Agatha muttered. "We're going to Morton." "At this hour? Do these crises never wait for daylight?" "Killer conspiracies rarely do." She downed the rest of her tea, grabbed her coat, and marched outside. Charles followed with all the enthusiasm of a man heading to a dental appointment. The drive to Morton in Marsh was quiet, the sky a patchwork of clouds and reluctant sunlight. Agatha's mind ticked through possibilities. Stroud hiding documents, Justin lying about Francis, the mysterious watcher at the dinner, the planted cigarette ends, Meredith's unfinished letter. Everything pointed at fear. Someone else's fear, not Meredith's. "Where exactly are we going?" Charles asked as the countryside rolled past. "Stroud mentioned somewhere safe," Agatha said. "A man like him picks predictable hiding places. Familiar places, private places. He lives in Morton. Think, what's quiet, forgotten, and won't draw attention?" "Your cottage after midnight," Charles suggested. "Not now." She considered. Woods? Too exposed. His home? Too obvious. A friend's place? Too unpredictable. A disused building, she murmured. Old farmhouse, barn. Something he knows but others ignore. Charles frowned. "There's an abandoned property on the outskirts. My family rented it out years ago. It's empty." "Show me." He turned down a narrow lane, tires crunching over gravel. The farmhouse came into view. Sagging roof, ivy choking the walls, windows boarded like closed eyes. It looked exactly like the sort of place where a terrified accountant would hide proof of embezzlement. Agatha stepped out of the car and inhaled the damp air. "He's here." "How do you know?" Charles whispered. "Because my stomach hurts. It always hurts before a breakthrough." They approached quietly. Agatha pushed the door. It creaked open with dramatic reluctance. The interior smelled of old hay and forgotten winters. Dust hung in the air. The faintest light seeped through holes in the boards. "Stroud?" Agatha called softly. A rustle answered. Then, movement in the far corner. Gerald Stroud emerged, shaking violently, holding a ledger to his chest. His glasses were cracked, face pale with fear. "Mrs. Raisin," he whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Agatha replied. "But here we are." He backed away, clutching the ledger tighter. "I didn't know who to trust. Someone followed me. Someone wants the documents." Agatha stepped closer. "Show us what you found." Stroud trembled, then gestured to a stack of mouldy crates. On top lay ledgers, papers, photocopies, handwritten notes. "Meredith brought me the accounts," he whispered. "Told me the charity money was being drained. Look." He opened a ledger with shaking hands. Agatha and Charles leaned in. Columns of figures, withdrawals disguised as outreach expenses. Duplicate invoices. Signatures forged, but carefully. "This is deliberate," Agatha said quietly. "Not sloppy. Someone covering their tracks." "Someone with access to the files," Charles added. Stroud nodded. Only one person could sign those authorizations without question. Only one had access to every drawer, every form, every approval sheet. Agatha's stomach tightened. "Justin." Stroud shut the ledger with a snap. "He begged me not to tell anyone. He said it started small, that he meant to replace the money. And Meredith found out," Agatha finished. Stroud sank onto an old crate. "She wanted to confront him. She was going to expose everything. She showed him the copies I'd made." Agatha felt the weight of the truth settling like dust. So Justin confronted her. "At the estate," Stroud whispered. "He followed her. They argued. She slipped, hit her head on a stone. He panicked. He used your file to make it look like a fight with you. He thought—" A soft creak of floorboards cut him off. All three turned. Justin Plowright stood in the doorway. His face was grey. His hands shook. He looked like a man who had been hunted by his own guilt. "Justin," Agatha said quietly, "come inside." He stepped in slowly, shutting the door behind him. His eyes fixed on the ledger Stroud had been holding moments before. "You weren't supposed to find this place," he whispered. "No one was." Agatha moved subtly between him and Stroud. "You left too many loose ends, Justin." His shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean to kill her." "That doesn't undo anything," Agatha said. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "She said she'd tell Francis. She said she'd go to the board. I only wanted her to wait. I thought I could fix it. 1 more month, that's all I needed." "Greed rarely keeps tidy schedules," Agatha said sharply. "It wasn't greed," Justin cried. "I borrowed a little at first. Only borrowed. My father was ill. Money was short. Then I realized no one checked the outreach invoices. No one cared." "Meredith cared," Agatha said. Justin shook his head as though trying to dislodge a memory. "She told me she admired me. She wanted me to stand up to Francis. But then she found the statements. She said it had gone too far. She said I had to confess." Agatha watched him closely. No malice, just pitiful panic. "You confronted her in the dark," Agatha murmured. "I begged her not to tell," Justin whispered. "She tried to push past me. I grabbed her arm. She slipped. Hit her head. It was an accident. But the moment she stopped moving, I knew I was finished." "So you staged the scene," Agatha said. "Used my stolen file, left her by the shed." "I thought it would look like an argument gone wrong." His voice cracked. "I was desperate," Stroud moaned softly, head in his hands. "You frightened him too," Agatha said, gesturing to Stroud. "I had to," Justin whispered. "If he talked, I'd be arrested. I left the cigarette ends in the woods. I thought the police would suspect Francis." "You fool," Agatha said softly. "Every lie you added made the truth clearer." Justin stared at her, breaking apart. "I'm not a bad person." Agatha felt a stab of reluctant sympathy. He wasn't wicked. He was weak. And weakness caused more disasters than malice ever did. "Sit down," she said quietly. "No more running." Justin dropped to the floor, shaking. Charles stepped outside to call Bill. Agatha crouched in front of Justin. "Look at me." He did, tears streaking his face. "Meredith didn't deserve this," Agatha said. "Stroud didn't deserve to be beaten, and Francis didn't deserve to be framed." Justin nodded miserably. "Tell the police everything," she said. "All of it." He hesitated, then whispered, "I wasn't the only one." Agatha's breath stilled. "What do you mean?" Justin swallowed hard. "Someone else knew. Someone higher up." "Higher up in the charity?" Justin shook his head. "Higher than that. Someone dangerous. Meredith was going to expose them too." Agatha felt cold trickle down her spine. "Who?" Justin opened his mouth, but the sudden arrival of police cars tore through the silence. Blue lights flashed through the cracks in the boarded windows. Footsteps thudded across the yard. Bill's voice rang out, sharp and urgent. "Agatha? Charles? Anyone inside?" Agatha stood abruptly. The moment was gone. The truth, half-spoken, hung between them like smoke. Bill entered with 2 officers. Justin surrendered without resistance, eyes empty. Stroud was helped to his feet, trembling but safe. The ledgers were collected, sealed in evidence bags. As the farmhouse emptied, Agatha stepped outside into the crisp air. The clouds had thinned. A weak, uncertain sun pushed through. Charles touched her arm. "You all right?" "No," Agatha said honestly, "but I'm used to it." "You did well," he murmured. "Spare me," she said softly, but without heat. Bill joined them. "We've got enough to charge Justin. This settles most of it." "Not all," Agatha replied. Bill frowned. "What's missing?" Agatha watched the horizon where the fields met the pale sky. "Justin said someone else knew. Someone higher up, someone dangerous." Bill stiffened. "He said that?" "Just before you arrived," Charles confirmed. Bill exhaled slowly. "Then this isn't over." "Nothing ever is," Agatha muttered. She stood there for a moment longer, letting the cold wind sting her cheeks. She felt tired, worn, angry at the waste of a young woman's life and the stupidity of the man who took it. Hodge would be waiting at home, probably sitting on her pillow, judging her lateness. "Let's go," Agatha said. She walked toward the car, cigarette already between her fingers. Behind her, the farmhouse sagged silently, no longer a hiding place, but a tomb for secrets that refused to stay buried. And somewhere in the Cotswolds, a more dangerous hand had begun to move. Morning arrived with a reluctant grey light, the kind that made Carsley look as though it, too, had stayed up worrying about murder. Agatha Raisin stood outside the vicarage, coat pulled tight, cigarette glowing defiantly in the drizzle. Bill Wong had summoned her, never a good sign this early. He stepped out moments later, looking hollow-eyed and rumpled. "We've questioned Justin all night." "And?" Agatha demanded. Bill rubbed his forehead. "He's confessed everything except the part we need, the identity of this higher-up. He claims he doesn't know their name, says he only knew someone else benefited." "He's lying," Agatha said. "Justin lies like other people breathe." "He's terrified, Agatha. Terrified men talk. Terrified liars ramble." Bill sighed. "We'll keep pushing him." "Do that," Agatha muttered. "Meanwhile, I'll think." This, Bill recognized, was not reassuring. Agatha walked through Carsley with the sort of brisk, irritated determination that made pedestrians leap out of her path. She lit another cigarette, the smoke curling into the moist air like exasperation made visible. The village looked normal, too normal, with Doris Simpson hanging washing despite the drizzle, the Red Lion rattling open its door, and the WI Hall decorated with bunting for some cheerful event that had absolutely no right to exist during a murder case. Agatha replayed everything. Meredith finding the fraud, Justin stealing funds, Francis arguing, Stroud trembling, someone sneaking around the manor, someone planting clues. Too many motives, too many lies, too many scared people for one simple truth. She turned toward the charity office in Evesham. It was as gloomy as always, the air thick with resentful paper and stale biscuits. Francis Delaney intercepted her instantly, face prim and offended. "Mrs. Raisin, I trust you've informed the police that I am innocent." "You haven't been proven guilty," Agatha said. "There's a difference." Francis bristled. "I was at a board meeting the night Meredith died. Minutes recorded. Witnesses. If anyone should be suspected, it's that pathetic boy." "He's confessed already," Agatha said. "But he didn't work alone." Francis paled. "Are you accusing me again?" "Not at the moment," Agatha replied briskly. "Annoying woman though you are." Peggy Troughton fluttered over. "Do they know who did it? Are we safe? Will this affect next month's fundraiser?" Agatha stared at her. "Someone is killing people over tens of thousands of pounds, and you're worried about raffle tickets?" Peggy blinked. "They're very good raffle tickets." Agatha left before she throttled anyone. Charles appeared outside the office just as Agatha emerged. His scarf was crooked, his expression hopeful, which irritated her instantly. "Any luck?" he asked. "No," and stopped smiling. "It's unnerving." "You seem tense." "Someone is still trying to kill people. I'm allowed to be tense." Charles offered her his arm. She ignored it. He pretended he hadn't offered. "Justin said someone higher up was involved," Agatha murmured. "Someone dangerous." "Francis," Charles guessed. "She's too proud and too incompetent." Framing Francis was too easy. She walked faster, thinking aloud. Meredith trusted Justin. Foolish but understandable. Justin trusted Meredith. Meredith went to Stroud with the documents. Stroud? Charles blinked. That nervous little man. He nearly fainted when you questioned him. Exactly, Agatha said. He trembles too much. Charles frowned. What does that mean? People who are genuinely terrified move unpredictably. Freeze, flee, rage. People who tremble neatly are performing. Charles looked impressed despite himself. Aggie, that actually sounded logical. Shut up, she said, marching toward the car. They drove to Morton-in-Marsh, drizzle smearing the windscreen. Stroud's tidy little house sat at the end of a quiet lane, each window tightly shut, curtains drawn like eyelids refusing to wake. Agatha felt a spark of certainty, an instinct sharpened by countless mistakes and murders. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. "Stroud!" she barked. "Open up!" Still nothing. Charles peered through a side window. "He's inside. I saw movement." Agatha tried the handle. Unlocked. "Guilty men forget locks," she muttered, pushing the door open. The house was cold, air stale with paper dust. Ledgers were stacked on the dining table. A half-packed bag sat on a chair. A mug of tea sat untouched, steam long gone. "He's getting ready to run," Agatha whispered, "which means he's guilty." A floorboard creaked upstairs. Agatha strode toward the sound with Charles scrambling behind her. She pushed open the bedroom door. Gerald Stroud stood by the wardrobe, stuffing clothes into a suitcase. His face went white the moment he saw her. "Mrs. Raisin," he croaked, "you shouldn't be here." "Oh, I should," Agatha said. "You and I have unfinished business." Stroud backed up until his legs hit the bed. "This isn't what you think." "Isn't it?" Agatha stepped closer. "Let's review." She counted on her fingers. "You knew the charity accounts better than anyone. Justin might have done the dirty work, but someone had to find the loopholes. Someone had to instruct him." Stroud shook his head violently. "No. Someone had to convince Meredith to gather any evidence. Someone she trusted. Someone who presented himself as a harmless accountant." His throat bobbed. Sweat prickled his forehead. Agatha pressed on. "You let Justin steal. You created the system. He was an idiot apprentice following a corrupt tutor." Charles blinked. "Aggie, that was almost poetic." "Shut it," Agatha snapped. Stroud's breathing quickened. "You don't understand. I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "But when Meredith got too close," Agatha said evenly, "you planned to silence her yourself." Stroud flinched. "And Justin beat you to it," Agatha finished. "Panicked. Killed her by accident. You arrived too late." Stroud clutched the wardrobe door as if it might defend him. "She pushed me. She pushed all of us. She wanted to expose everything." "Because it was wrong," Agatha said sharply. "You greedy old fool. You let a young woman die." Something snapped then. Something hard, brittle, and frightening. Stroud lunged toward the doorway. Charles, usually a man who avoided effort with religious devotion, stepped forward and blocked the exit with surprising firmness. "No, old chap," he said. "Stay." Stroud froze, shocked by the unexpected heroism. Agatha folded her arms. "This is new. Charles doing something useful." "Don't ruin the moment," Charles muttered. Stroud's voice rose to a shrill whine. "You don't understand. None of you understand. I kept that charity alive. I kept it functioning. Those useless volunteers, those insufferable women, they fight over bake sales and committee places. But I managed the real work. Me. And what thanks did I receive?" "A murder investigation," Agatha said flatly. "Hardly a bonus." Stroud shook, fury distorting his features. "I gave my life to that place. They treated me like furniture. Meredith thought she was clever. She thought she'd expose me. I couldn't let her. I needed more time." "You killed her," Agatha said. "You manipulated Justin. You terrified him. You tried to finish what he started." Stroud pressed his back against the wall, breathing hard. "It wasn't supposed to go like this." "It never does," Agatha replied. Heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs. Bill Wong appeared in the doorway with 2 officers. Stroud's knees buckled. Bill stepped forward. "Gerald Stroud, I'm arresting you." Stroud broke into wild, choking sobs. Agatha stepped back, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline ebbed, leaving her cold. Charles placed a hand on her shoulder, unusually gentle. "Aggie," he murmured. "I'm fine," she said stiffly, but her hands trembled just slightly, so she hid them in her pockets. Bill led Stroud downstairs. The old man babbled about ungrateful volunteers and stolen brilliance as he vanished through the door. Agatha finally exhaled. "You did well," Charles said softly. "Stop that," she muttered. "You'll ruin your reputation." They stepped outside. The drizzle had thinned, leaving the morning washed clean and strangely bright. Agatha inhaled the cold air, wishing it could clear the heaviness inside her. "It's over," Charles said. "Almost," Agatha replied. He frowned. "What's left?" Agatha turned to him slowly, eyes narrowing. "Why did you take my file from my desk in the first place?" Charles froze. Agatha folded her arms. "Well?" He scratched his cheek, suddenly sheepish. "Ah, yes, that." "Charles Fraith," Agatha said sharply. "If you say you were dusting, I'll hit you with the nearest flower pot." He laughed nervously. "No dusting. I thought it might impress you if I helped with your little project." Agatha blinked. "Impress me?" "Don't look so horrified," he said. "You're surprisingly difficult to impress." Agatha opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "You idiot," she said quietly. Charles looked genuinely relieved. "So you're not angry?" "I'm furious," she said, "but I'm less furious than I was." They walked toward the car. Agatha stopped halfway, glancing back at the house where Stroud had been arrested. Her hands stopped trembling. She felt tired and proud and lonely and alive. Everything Agatha Raisin specialized in. "Come on, Charles," she said briskly. "I've got a cat to feed." Hodge would be waiting on her pillow, judging her lateness, unimpressed by murderers, motives, or midnight meetings. Some things, thankfully, never changed. Carsley woke to thin sunshine and the faint smell of damp hedgerows, a deceptive sort of morning that suggested calm order, even while Agatha Raisin marched toward the Red Lion with the expression of a woman prepared to throttle someone over toast. The drizzle of the previous night had faded to a soft gleam on the pavements, and villagers bustled cheerfully, blissfully unaware that murder, fraud, and emotional idiocy had kept Agatha awake far too long. She shoved open the Red Lion door. The comforting scents of frying bacon and burnt coffee drifted out. At the corner table sat Charles Fraith, reading the newspaper with exaggerated innocence. His scarf was draped as though a stylist had arranged it, and his hair had the sort of careless neatness that only very vain men or very lucky ones achieved. Agatha marched over. "You talk now." Charles blinked. "Good morning to you too." She sat opposite him, slamming her handbag onto the table. "Charles, I am tired. I am irritable, and I have absolutely no patience left. Why did you take that file? Why meddle? And don't even think about smiling." He lowered his newspaper. "Aggie, don't Aggie me." He folded the paper carefully as though stalling for time. "Would you like a tea first?" "No," Agatha snapped. "Confess." Charles sighed and leaned back, his tone shifting into something unusually serious. "All right. I took the file because I wanted an excuse." "An excuse for what?" Agatha demanded. "To spend more time with you?" Agatha felt her face go hot, which infuriated her even more. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm never ridiculous," Charles said airily. "Well, rarely." He tapped the table lightly. "You were getting so involved with this PR job and the charity nonsense. I thought if I helped, you'd let me linger about a bit." "You're always lingering," Agatha muttered. "Yes, but you're so very sharp these days." His voice softened. "I didn't want you to push me away." Agatha's indignation faltered. "That's absurd. I don't—" He cut her off gently. "Aggie, you terrify most people without even trying. It's part of your charm. But I rather like being terrified occasionally." Agatha sputtered. "Oh, don't be poetic." "I'm never poetic," he said again. "Only honest." She opened her mouth to retort, but the warmth creeping into her cheeks forced her to look away. She busied herself smoothing her napkin with unnecessary focus. "And the dinner?" she muttered. He hesitated, then admitted, "I wanted you there because everyone behaves for you, more or less. I thought if tensions eased, you'd say something pleasant about me." "Pleasant?" Agatha scoffed. "You want compliments now?" "One or two wouldn't kill you," Charles said lightly. Agatha snorted, but a reluctant smile tugged at her lips. It was unpleasant to feel flattered when one had intended to be furious. Before she could reply, the door swung open and Roy Silver came hurtling in like a brightly coloured weather system. He wore an iridescent jacket and carried a cappuccino the size of a flower pot. "Darlings," Roy burst out, sliding into the seat beside Agatha without invitation. "Have you seen the papers? The murder, the fraud, the secret files. The press is eating it up. And guess whose name is mentioned? Yours, Aggie. You're practically a national treasure." Agatha groaned. "That's all I need. Reporters sniffing around." "Think of the publicity," Roy beamed. "We could spin it into a marvelous narrative. Local sleuth outsmarts corrupt accountant." "Very empowering." "The only thing I want empowered is my sleep," Agatha muttered. Roy fluttered a hand. "Darling, justice never sleeps. Neither does scandal. Besides, you look fabulous in print." She certainly did not, but she accepted the compliment anyway. Bill Wong entered the pub then, coat damp and expression weary. "I should have known I'd find all of you here." "We're celebrating my brilliance," Roy said. Bill ignored him and turned to Agatha. "Stroud has been processed. Justin will be charged. And you were right all along, Agatha." She allowed herself a small, pleased smirk. "Of course I was," Bill smiled. "Still, Bear, be careful. Even solved cases have sharp edges." "Don't lecture me," Agatha said, but her tone softened. She cared for Bill more than she ever admitted. They chatted a little longer, Roy giddily recounting gossip he'd gathered from London colleagues, Bill explaining the dull procedural aftermath, Charles smiling with a warmth that Agatha obstinately pretended not to see. Eventually, though, fatigue tugged at her bones. She stood. "I need to go home. Hodge has probably rearranged my furniture." Charles rose too. "I'll walk you." "No need," she said quickly. "Aggie, you're exhausted." She searched for a retort, found none, and settled for a small shrug. "Fine, but don't hover." "Hovering is my specialty." They walked back to Lilac Lane together. Carsley felt peaceful again, freshly washed hedgerows, chimneys puffing contentedly, Mrs. Bloxby cycling past with a basket of hymn sheets. If not for murder, deceit, and Charles's ridiculous confession, it might almost have been a normal morning. Outside Agatha's cottage, Charles paused. "You know I meant what I said." "Yes, well," Agatha said briskly, "don't get used to it." He grinned. "I live in hope." Agatha rolled her eyes and fled indoors before he could say anything else sentimental. Inside, the cottage hummed with familiar quiet. The faint scent of old books and cat fur settled around her like a blanket. Agatha hung her coat on the hook, kicked off her shoes, and walked toward the study. Hodge lay sprawled across her desk like a furry paperweight, belly up, paws twitching, purring in deep, self-satisfied rumbles. Beneath him, naturally, was the recovered file, the one Justin had stolen and Stroud had tried to erase. "Of course," Agatha muttered. "You do this on purpose." She lifted Hodge gently. He flopped into her arms with the joyous heaviness only cats managed, purring louder as she stroked behind his ears. "You," she whispered, burying her face briefly in his warm fur, "have astonishingly good timing for a creature who sleeps 18 hours a day." Hodge blinked, unimpressed by praise, murder, or human frailty. Agatha placed him on the chair and sat at the desk. Exhaustion pressed on her shoulders, but relief threaded through it, the case solved, the danger past, the pieces fitting together at last. She reached for a cigarette, lit it, and inhaled deeply. The smoke curled toward the ceiling, carrying tension with it. Agatha let herself lean back, eyes briefly closing as Hodge navigated onto her lap like a small, entitled king. For a few peaceful moments, there was nothing but her cat, her smoke, and the quiet reassurance of home. Then her gaze fell on the corner of the desk, where a new envelope lay. Cream paper, no return address, her name written in unfamiliar handwriting, no stamp either, hand-delivered. Agatha straightened, pulse tightening. Hodge's ears flicked as though he sensed something shifting again. "Oh, marvelous," Agatha muttered, "because heaven forbid I have 5 minutes of peace in this village." She tapped the envelope once, twice, aware that opening it meant engagement with whatever fresh nonsense awaited. Hodge swished his tail, unimpressed. Agatha smirked faintly. "Fine. Let's see what the universe wants now." She slid a finger beneath the flap. And the chapter closed on the moment before revelation, the faint tremor of intrigue settling once again over the Cotswolds, as inevitable as drizzle, gossip, and the eternal presence of Hodge. Carsley eased into the morning with a soft hush, the kind found only in small villages after drama has burnt itself out. Clouds drifted lazily overhead, hinting at drizzle, yet apparently too tired to bother. Agatha Raisin sat at her desk, staring at the mystery envelope she had discovered the night before. Hodge curled smugly beside it, as if he had personally vetted its contents. She tore it open with unnecessary force. Inside lay a single note, written in Francis Delaney's brisk hand. "Thank you for restoring dignity to the charity. Despite our differences, I appreciate your diligence." Agatha snorted. "Dignity. That'll be the day." Yet she slipped the note into a drawer instead of the bin. One could never tell when a bit of written gratitude might prove useful in conversations, real or imagined, about her investigative achievements. She opened a window. A mild Cotswold breeze nudged the curtains, carrying hints of wet grass and distant chimney smoke. Somewhere down Lilac Lane someone was beating a rug as if punishing past sins. Carsley wasted no time bouncing back to gossip and routine. Meredith Prowse, fraud, and potting sheds had already begun their gentle slide into village lore. Agatha made coffee far too strong, lit a cigarette, and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Solving murders was exhausting, but it certainly stopped her from dying of boredom like so many respectable villagers. By mid-afternoon, a soft knock sounded at the door. Mrs. Bloxby stood there, calm as ever, holding a basket covered with a gingham cloth. "I thought you might need something comforting," she said, stepping inside. Agatha lifted the cloth. Warm scones greeted her like a heavenly chorus. "You're an angel," she muttered. "Just a vicar's wife," Mrs. Bloxby replied with gentle amusement. They sat at the small kitchen table. Sunlight pooled across the tiles, and Hodge supervised from a chair with regal indifference. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea from Agatha's hopelessly chipped pot, the steam curling like soft punctuation around her warm expression. "You did remarkably well," she said. Agatha looked away. Compliments made her itchy. "I simply did what needed doing." "Not everyone would have," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. "You're very brave, Agatha." Heat rose in Agatha's chest. She tried to disguise it by slicing a scone too aggressively. "I'm not brave. I just get fed up quickly." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "That too." They ate in companionable silence, the sort Agatha only ever managed with Mrs. Bloxby. After the vicar's wife left, Agatha found herself staring at the empty chair across from hers. It was odd how peace could feel pleasant and unsettling at the same time. The phone rang later, jangling through her cottage like an overeager sales pitch. She answered. "Agatha," Charles drawled. "I was thinking, dinner tonight, purely as friends, unless you insist otherwise." Agatha stiffened. "The line's awful, Charles. You sound like you're underwater." "I haven't said anything complicated yet." "Terrible connection," she insisted, raising her voice. "Very muffled. Must go." And she hung up before her resolve could weaken. "Men," she muttered. Hodge, sprawled across the rug, offered no opinion. Sensible creature. As dusk crept in, Carsley settled into its familiar evening rhythm. A dog barked somewhere near the vicarage. The Red Lion's sign creaked softly in the cooling air. The sky flushed purple, then faded to a mild, smoky blue. Agatha stepped outside for fresh air that she promptly spoiled with a cigarette. She leaned against the doorway, watching the lane soften into shadow. Smoke drifted upward, catching in the faint glow of her porch light. She thought of Meredith. Too young, too ambitious, too trusting. She thought of Justin, selfish and pathetic rather than evil. She thought of Stroud, whose cold cunning had fooled everyone. And finally, she thought of herself, standing here after everything, tired, triumphant, a little lonely, and annoyingly restless. "Exhausting," she murmured to the night. "Absolutely exhausting." Back inside, Hodge padded after her, tail aloft. He jumped onto her chair before she could reach it and curled into a tight loaf, purring with ingrained smugness. Agatha reached down, smoothing a hand over his warm fur. His purring deepened, vibrating like a small engine of self-satisfaction. "You're the only male I can depend on," Agatha told him. Hodge blinked slowly, perfectly agreeable. She gathered her papers into a neat stack. The charity file sat atop it, fully restored at last. She tapped it once. "Next time I'll keep everything locked," she muttered. Hodge yawned, unimpressed. He had no intention of participating in any future administrative vigilance. Agatha lit another cigarette, letting the smoke drift lazily as she watched the twilight settle over her home. The peace was strangely comforting, though she knew it would never last long. It never did in Carsley, not with its talent for drama tucked beneath hedgerows and its unerring ability to thrust her into it. But peace tasted sweet for now. She switched off the lamp, leaving only the hallway light glowing faintly. Hodge stretched luxuriously, then curled once more into sleep, perfectly secure in the knowledge that the world would wait on him. Agatha lingered a moment longer, listening to the hush of her cottage. She exhaled a thin thread of smoke, the ember flashing warmly in the dimness. "For now," she said aloud, "this will do." Carsley lay quiet under its modest sky, a village at rest, a detective at uneasy peace, and somewhere inside Agatha Raisin, beneath vanity, bravado, and the urge to interfere, a small spark already stirred, a spark that always woke when life grew too calm. Trouble would come again, it always did, and she would be ready. For the moment, though, Agatha Raisin sat with her cigarette, her cat, and the faintest hint of contentment, a rare treasure in the Cotswolds.